and now presented entirely without context, a passage from the novel Half-Life. Fitz knew it was a dream, but it was no less disturbing for that. He was standing in the TARDIS console room, facing the main doors, and he was naked. That wouldn't normally have bothered him, apart from the fact that he could feel something cool touching his buttocks. The fact that he knew it was another pair of buttocks was slightly disturbing, but knowing, in the way that you do in dreams, that they were the doctor's buttocks was just too much. But of course, as it was a dream, there was nothing he could do. He was rooted to the spot, rubbing bottoms with the doctor. "Doctor," he said in the awkward way that you do when you're cheek to cheek with your best friend. Now, as stimulating as that was, I ask you just to put it away and save it for the end of the video. Please, dear God, have some self-control. Maybe it would be strange to talk about sexuality in a 60s children's TV show, but it's not as if they didn't consider that at the time. It was decided that Susan Foreman should be the Doctor's granddaughter just to dispel any weird idea of an old man and a young girl travelling alone together. Because while sensibilities surrounding sex have changed since the 1960s, they were still clearly a factor. Fiction was conscious of what to show and what they could never, ever show, because it's such an unavoidable factor in our own lives, a core essential. So yes, today we're talking about sexuality in the Doctor Who series. No snickering at the back. Now I know what the Ultra Nerd is saying, looms. But I'd like to remind you that the first and second Doctor were portrayed as human. Sophisticated humans from the far future, but still very much human, and the fact that he has a granddaughter implicitly tells us that the Doctor does the dirty. I have had some experience with the fairer sex. Thank you, Moffat, for giving me that image of William Hartnell getting down. But of course, if he has a family, it only stands to reason he has done the deed. Today's video is less, does Doctor Who fuck? And more so, is the Doctor genuinely asexual? An incredibly interesting topic that I am about to do no justice with. For proper asexual angles to the series, please follow fans like Friends of Ace and Lauren Fox, as there certainly won't be any thorough analysis or lived experience here. John Pertwee, Paul Cornell, Tom Baker, John Nathan Turner, Colin Baker, and maybe everybody in the 1960s BBC are adamant, word of God, definite that the Doctor is asexual. The Doctor is a very valid and very natural piece of ace representation, but like everything with Doctor Who, it's not that simple. Now, it's obvious that the 60s were very sterile. There were even few allusions to romance, never mind sex, with Ian and Barbara not even allowed to kiss on screen. In his own opinion, Baker said that love was a very human emotion, whereas the other Baker explicitly stated that's how he played the character, completely unaware of human sexuality.
Well, you're a beautiful woman, probably.
As fans are reminded frequently, John Nathan Turner had a strong no hanky-panky in the TARDIS rule, which is bizarre, as this is the man who gave us Perry Brown and Chameleon. It all changes once the 8th Doctor hits the scene. Not only does the show change target demographic and finally begin exploring adult material, but the Doctor also looks like this now. With all of these new emerging writers desperate to push Doctor Who as a franchise, it was inevitable that Doctor Who was going to get a bit more frisky, shall we say. For the most part, 8 is still portrayed as asexual. Questionably romantic, but definitely asexual. Except all of those romantic quips, all of the flirting with Fitz or Charlie, and even at one time, Izzy. Now fair enough, those could be jokes, passing quips. But you know what isn't a quip? That one time he spent the night with Gallifreyan monk I.M. Foreman. Yeah, that's one for another time. There's also the 8th Doctor's heavily implied sexual encounter with Bernice Summerfield, and Ohila of the Sisterhood of Khan has also got naughty with the Doctor, which is just upsetting more than anything. Which incarnation is it? We will never know. Moffat, stop doing this. When the revival comes round, the main relationship, the core dynamic, is a romantic one, with Moffat's first script of the series pushing the question, does the Doctor dance? You know, it's not a subtle metaphor. It's such a strange priority, but it's only natural coming from a comedy sitcom writer. Jokes about the nuclear family or jokes at the expense of gender roles are kind of par for the course. I'm not criticising Moffat's angle here. I love the Doctor dances, and I think has much loftier ambitions than most people give it credit for. The empty child marks a mid-series point where the Doctor and Rose do stop and ask each other, so what am I to you? Romantically, where do we stand? I think it's more playful than Moffat just driving home the point that the Doctor needs to have sex to be happy, but regardless, Russell T Davies is using this to further a character arc and a relationship. Series 2 continues Russell's intentional, beautiful relationship, but it's very innocent. A series of time and space dates and discussions about domestic life, but never the physical. Whilst Moffat is giving 10 moments like this.
That there comes a time, Time Lord, when every lonely little boy must learn how to dance.
So it seems like these two are in a wrestling match between romantic and physically intimate. Some people rightly criticise Moffat as writing the Doctor as a specky nerd in the 80s. Maybe even a reflection of themselves at a young age. Girl in the Fireplace is either a fairy tale about the Doctor discovering love or the Doctor discovering sex. That sounds crass, but that's exactly what it is in the text. And then you get to 11, who really embodies this. Coded as a small child and claiming to not even know what sex is. To then put that Doctor in a relationship with hypersexual femme fatale River Song is a little bit dodgy. It also leads to really uncomfortable lines like this.
Impossible girl. A mystery wrapped in an enigma squeezed into a skirt that's just a little bit too tight.
Maybe 12 was the better match for River, a Doctor who canonically enjoyed BDSM. No, I'm not expanding on that. Have some faith. Now that we know that every single new series showrunner is admittedly horny, it's by and large Moffat who was the biggest contributor to this. Something that stretches in motive all the way back to his forum-dwelling days. Yeah, take a read of some of these, they're really interesting, and tell us that, to Moffat, this is part of the ethos of the character. The Doctor's sexuality doesn't really make sense or have any consistency because the Doctor's origin doesn't have any consistency or sense. For as romantic and vain as the 10th Doctor was, this is the first mention of him implicitly doing anything physical.
Good Queen Bess. And let me tell you, her nickname is no longer... Anyway.
Whereas Moffat tried to write him as asexual as possible. He had to follow from the framework given to him by RTD, but in the Day of the Doctor novelisation, he shares a bath with one River Song, and refuses to even take his shoes off. And I get it, he's a fan operating in the wilderness years. But come on. For more of its history than it hasn't, the Doctor has been asexual. And I think we're back to that. There are many active asexual Doctor Who fans, and it's no wonder to see what attracted them to a series and a main character like this. But much like how the show is catered in different mediums, different eras, for different audiences with different tones, I think it might be a bit fruitless to try and pin down the Doctor as any one thing. Maybe the sexuality and his interests do change every regeneration, but maybe it'd be more poignant to fixate on a writer, showrunner to showrunner, you know, decade to decade. I wasn't trying to write an essay on asexuality in Doctor Who in this, I'm just broaching a broke canon topic with a bit of comedy thrown in. But it has become a relevant and ever-changing aspect of the series. A long series of unrestricted and uncensored material. Anything that can happen in Doctor Who, inevitably over 60 years, will eventually happen. The revival is very insistent on the subject, but also very inconsistent. It's very easy to picture Moffat as the figurehead of this. After all, it is a fixation of his as a writer that extends all the way back to this.
How could I possibly forget the only time-travelling companion I've ever had?
You've had lots of companions.
The only time-travelling companion I've had.
Oh, right.
But there's a lot of factors that led us here. The Puritanism of the 60s, the eyebrow-raising lack of it in the 80s, the counterculture of the 90s, and for the 70s, I don't know, John Pertwee would probably be like, a gentleman never tells. Yeah, alright, Doc. Liz left because they had an awkward fling at work. It was during a work do. Things got awkward in the office. Personally, I don't like my sci-fi to be sterile. I find that so much science fiction and fantasy is void of even anything remotely passionate. But that doesn't mean that explicit sexual intimacy is required. So on a serious note, in a very unserious video, I genuinely understand every perspective on this. I do think sexuality has a place in Doctor Who. Just maybe not how it's been done prior. I know nothing is sacrosanct in a show like Doctor Who, but some things can be sacred. Do I believe this is the be-all and end-all of Moffat's relationship with the character? No, because then he wouldn't signed off his tenure, driving it home so hard how Doctor Who is a show for young children. There's lots of angles, I like them all. Frankly, you're not fooling me that none of this TARDIS team are into each other. It's just... come on, it's just not happening. I am sorry, John Nathan Turner. There is very much hanky-panky happening inside your TARDIS. For better or for worse. And no conversation could be had about Doctor Who without including Dr. Screw. That guy, he's a stud. Unstoppable. And now canon, thanks to Chris Chibnall!